You're listening to the Full Court Press with your host, Drew Duncan. Don't you dare touch that dial. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Full Court Press. I am your host, Drew Duncan. You guys are checking me out live from the K-Sun Studios out here in Wichita, Kansas. As always, you can be part of the program by tweeting me. That's at DrewDuncan83. Of course, the official fan page, the Full Court Press, is on Facebook. And if you love Instagram, I am on there at DrewDuncan83. Got a big show to get to today, guys. I'm calling this one Weird Wednesday. Just a lot of weird stuff going on, right? Stephon Marbury says he's coming back to the NBA. We'll be discussing that on the program. The USC Trojans are not acknowledging the loss to the Texas Longhorns in the BCS national title game from 11 years ago. We'll be discussing that. The LA Rams, the Jacksonville Jaguars, and the Buffalo Bills are all first place teams. It's so weird today. Weird Wednesday. That's exactly what I'm calling this. We begin with the news that the USC Trojans, per multiple sources, have decided that their loss to Texas just doesn't count. Quote, USC is 4-0 in its series with Texas, not including one loss vacated due to NCAA penalties. USC's wins came in a pair of home-and-home meetings in the mid-1950s, and it goes on and on and on. Except for one problem. The NCAA does acknowledge that loss that you had to Texas because it wouldn't be fair when you got sanctioned to have that game go against Texas. You all remember Reggie Bush had to give back his Heisman Trophy. Well, he didn't have to. He, quote, voluntarily gave it back, stemming from investigations and allegations that came in 2010. The sanctions were followed up in 2011. They brought in Lane Kiffin to try and fix everything thereafter, but the allegations stem from players who were academically ineligible. Reggie Bush allegedly got a house with a lawn. His mom allegedly got a job and a car. And the USC Trojans, as a result of that, they're like, wait a minute, bro. That game doesn't count either. Really? This is what it's like trying to have a conversation with the USC Trojans.
The details of my life are quite inconsequential.
Run that back.
The details of my life are quite inconsequential.
Oh, man. Oh, USC, I'm telling you what. They've just been a mess, haven't they? They're like, we don't want to acknowledge that game. No. You could take away our titles. If you're going to do that, well, then that other game just doesn't count either, guys. Nope.
The details of my life are quite inconsequential.
Oh, man. You know what they sound like? They sound like this right here. Well,
He would make outrageous claims like he invented the question mark.
He invented the question mark. USC, what are they doing? Are they trying to promote the matchup this Saturday between them and Texas? Is that what's going on? Maybe these guys ought to get in a fight promoting instead. I'm sure they'd have done a knock-up job with the McGregor-Mayweather fight. That would have. Oh, man. And then did you see where they were talking about making this a revenge game? They're going to make it a revenge game, guys. From what? A game that was played a decade plus ago? Are we really doing this right now? Why? I ask you, why are we doing this? It doesn't make any sense to me. There's no reason for anybody to talk about this as if it was a revenge game. Look, leave that game exactly where it is in history. The best BCS championship that we ever got, period. The Oklahoma LSU game, maybe. But leave that game in history. One of the best comebacks ever in college football history. Vince Young completely took control of that football game. It was one of the greatest games in college football history, period, for a national title. I mean, it ranks right up there with the Nebraska-Miami game. Remember that back in the early 90s, Nebraska-Miami. The Nebraska-Florida State game was a hell of a game to watch. Ohio State taking on Miami was a phenomenal game to watch. Leave that game where it is. This is not a revenge game. Nobody was coaching at that time on these two teams. Nobody was playing at that time on these two teams. Let's stop trying to make everything a rival situation. These teams are not rivals, guys. They don't play each other that often. They just, USC doesn't want to acknowledge this loss to Texas, but they'll keep those two losses against KU. There you go, Jayhawk fans. You got something over USC that allegedly the Longhorns don't even have. 2 wins. Oh, my goodness. Leave that game alone. Not to mention, to be honest with you, both teams over the last 7 years haven't done anything, right? Texas was in another BCS title game against Alabama. They were getting smoked for the better part of that football game, right? Colt McCoy gets hurt. The backup comes in. It gets close, but no cigar. Other than that, Texas has done nothing over the last 7 years. USC has done nothing. They hired Lane Kiffin. That didn't go anywhere for them. Okay, they brought in Ed Ogeron as an interim coach. He does a really great job. They decide, nope, we don't want this guy. They go off and make another hire. They have to fire him for reasons that we're not really going to discuss, other than, allegedly he had some issues with alcohol and pill use. I don't want to get too much into that. Now they've got another new head coach. They've already taken a loss to Stanford. Why doesn't everybody just focus on this game? Because Texas has lost to Maryland this season. And Tom Herman is all, we can't sprinkle fairy dust on this and, fix everything. Well, good for you, bro, but this is exactly what Urban Meyer was talking about. The way that you're relating to your kids, the way these universities are seeing each other right now. Let's just leave this all alone and focus on this Saturday. Why don't everybody worry about whether or not Shane Bluchel can get the ball rolling? Why doesn't everybody worry about whether or not Texas can actually play some defense? How about that? I'm just saying. Just leave that game in the past. That's exactly where it belongs. The inability to move on is because of recent failures. Lou Holtz, one of the greatest coaches of all time, and to me, one of the best motivational coaches of all time, said something that is very telling. If you're still talking about what you did yesterday, then you haven't done anything today. And both of these football teams are still stuck on what they did yesterday. Why? Because they haven't done anything today. Period. Does anybody really think that football game is relevant right now? Yeah, sure, maybe to Texas fans that game is still very relevant, and I can understand. But it's kind of like listening to a Dallas Cowboy fan talk about all those Super Bowls that they won when they've won one playoff game in the last 20 years. You can't just hang your hat on this one accomplishment forever. You've got a few years to live it out, and that's about it, guys. After a while, it goes away. This is, again, why I don't agree with preseason top 25 polls. Texas gets ranked at the beginning of the season. They lose to Maryland. USC gets ranked at the top of the season. And have they impressed anybody? They had one decent win against Western Michigan, who I understand was defeated a year ago, but that was a year ago. They don't even have their head coach anymore. And then they get beat by Stanford. This is just why I don't do top 25 polls preseason. What I'm concerned about going into this football game is when you start with this mentality, here come the questions to the players, to the athletes. You get them start thinking about this kind of nonsense. And that's exactly what it is. It's nonsense. Why would you do that? Why would you bother? Who put that out? I want to know the original source for this. Who put this out? USC's like, dude, we're not acknowledging that. It's not fair to us. If you don't want to acknowledge our championship wins, then we're not going to acknowledge our championship loss. What, are you mad, bro? Are you mad that you had a team that was tainted and still couldn't win? Is that what it is? That's got to be what it is. Hey, we were supposed to win that third title. We were up with, 6-something left in the football game by 11 points, 12 points, whatever it was. Bottom line, his final score is 41-38 Texas. The NCAA recognizes that football game. The Texas Longhorns recognize that football game. Every other fan in the country recognizes that football game. But no, not the Trojans. They're like, hey, you, sir, need to stop making sense. The details of my life are merely inconsequential. Oh, man. You're killing me, Smalls. Oh, I'm telling you. USC. Boy, oh boy. Revenge. This is not a revenge game. You lost. Get over it. It's not a revenge game. Nobody here is playing for the pride of redeeming that Trojans team that lost that football game. That's not happening here. Nobody is acknowledging this. It's not happening. That's what I mean, man. Today is so weird. There's not even a full moon out or nothing. It's just weird, bro. USC. Oh, man. You know, I'm telling you right now, I think that this is a huge part of the problem when it comes to things like this. But at the end of the day, the Trojans did it to themselves. Pete Carroll, I guarantee, has moved on. Everybody else has moved on. Why can't you officially just move on from this? There's literally no reason to continuously bring that up. Why keep picking at the wound, man? Just cover that thing up, let it ride, and that be it. You know, I remember, what was it? I think it was probably right around the same time frame. My dad and I had gone to go watch Michigan play Nebraska in a bowl game. It was fairly meaningless. I mean, obviously to college kids it meant something, so I want to say meaningless because clearly me and my dad were watching it. But the angle that was taken in this bowl game was revenge from back when, instead of Nebraska and Michigan playing each other, Nebraska ends up playing Tennessee and smokes them. Michigan ends up playing Washington State in the Rose Bowl, doesn't win very impressively, and they split the title that year. Matter of fact, it was the season directly before the BCS started, and everybody thought that the BCS was going to solve this problem. Well, guess what? It didn't. You know, one of the great things about that USC-Texas ordeal was it was the first and only time, matter of fact, I'm 99% sure it was the only time, that teams who started out in the top 5 ended up playing each other in the BCS national title game. And by the way, that game wouldn't have even happened if it hadn't been for Vince Young and what he did at Oklahoma State. I remember very vividly watching that game, and it was like 28-0 or 28-3 at halftime. The game was in Stillwater. Texas is getting smoked bad. It's 4th down. Mac Brown decides to go for it. Nobody's open. Vince Young peels off a long touchdown run, and after that, it completely alters the football game. Texas comes back and ends up winning the game. That season was special on so many levels. Matter of fact, didn't Texas beat Ohio State at the shoe that year? Texas, played a hell of a season. They made it through what was still then the Big 12. You had Texas, Oklahoma, Nebraska was still a solid football team. Come on. Missouri was kind of peaking around that time and starting to develop as a program and really solidify themselves into football. Kansas State was still doing very good with Coach Schneider. Come on, guys. Don't be so selfish as to take something away from somebody else that was so great. Vince Young had one of the greatest seasons ever in college football history. He was a one-man team. Limas Sweet and Williams weren't really all that good at wide receiver. Yeah, they were great college players, but they didn't do anything in the NFL. And truth be told, really, neither did Vince Young. I mean, he was Rookie of the Year, Offensive Rookie of the Year. But after that, his career just kind of spun out for this reason or that reason. But you can't take away what Vince Young accomplished that year. You just can't. And to me, he was the Heisman Trophy winner. Come on, man. Two of the Reggie Bush, Matt Leinart, Vince Young, Mac Brown, and Pete Carroll were all on the same football field that day. Don't wreck it, man. That was great football. That was what football is. That's what football is all about, is that game right there. Leave it at that. This is the Full Court Press. I am your host, Drew Duncan. You guys are checking me out live from the KSUN studios out here in Wichita, Kansas. Don't forget, I am on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at DrewDuncan83. Follow me. You can tweet me. You can Facebook me. You can hit me up on Instagram. Questions, comments, memes. We want to hear it all. I want to hear your opinion about Texas and USC, hopefully as it pertains to coming up this Saturday. This is the Full Court Press. I am Drew Duncan. A lot more to get to right after this. Don't you dare touch that dial.
Pensiero